Now that we've talked a little bit about e-commerce, it's of use to talk about distribution systems. We talk about distribution systems for a couple of reasons. One, for many industries in hospitality, namely the airline industry and the lodging industry, distribution systems are absolutely critical to the daily operation and success of those segments. We also talk about distribution systems now as opposed to later because we're going to have a one of our guest speakers in a couple weeks is going to be from a distribution company called Amadeus, one of the more popular distribution companies. So I want to talk a little bit about distribution systems. But we can't talk about distribution systems unless we talk about the idea of reservations, and that's really where and how we manage reservations and the reservations process and how we book those things before we talk about global distribution. And for some people, global distribution is one of the more complex aspects of the hospitality business. Yes, the management of global distribution systems can be difficult, but the overall concept really shouldn't be. The term global distribution can be defined, in the case of this class, as attaining the broadest possible reach, meaning the most number of people to the largest available audience, meeting a company's target market segments at the most affordable cost with the highest potential for winning conversion. And essentially it's bookings, it's making reservations. So essentially what that is how can we reach the most amount of people, make sure that we're reaching the right people? How do we make sure that we're making sure that those right people are seeing things priced correctly, and then convince them to book and make it really easy for them to book? That process is global distribution. Just a graphical representation of it here. I'll let you kind of look at that in more depth. But essentially what global distribution allows is global distribution assumes that the customer is not always going to go directly to a company's website to book. That they're not going to go to Marriott's hotel website. They're not going to go to United Airlines to book. They're going to go through an intermediary. And that intermediary, whether it's a travel agent, whether it's a search engine, whatever it might be, a mobile app, that is really the challenge. And the global distribution comes into play because we have the assumption that customers want to have lots of different options for how and when they book things. We have to take a step back, though, and talk a little bit about what central reservations is. Central reservations really revolutionized the way that bookings were done in the hotel industry. In the 1960s, there was a decision that we really want to have a central reservations line or center. It really literally was a brick and mortar building that had a phone bank in it that people would call in. So, they would call the 1-800 number for Marriott and they could book any one of the Marriott properties. That through a network, the reservation system was all connected. But it started off very, very slow because we really didn't have the technology infrastructure to do that. More specifically, we didn't have the ability to connect property management systems with central reservation systems. We didn't really start to see that until about the 1990s. Holiday Inn was the first. But the idea that that the customer can contact the business directly and book any one of the properties, it revolutionized the way people made reservations. Holiday Inn started it, and in 2003, we really started to see chains take this to the next level. And now what you see is every individual chain has a central reservations function. In 2009, we started to see the central reservation functions get into smart devices, tablets, choice hotels, an unlikely candidate, but it makes sense in the value, kind of the economy sector, that they would want to try to find ways to cut costs. And a really good way to do that was shifting their e-commerce transactions of booking online. But the central reservation system wasn't enough. The central reservation system relied on a consistent fact. Somebody had to contact that central reservation center, whether it was a travel agent, whether it was the customer themselves. Somebody had to book. There wasn't the mechanism where the travel agent or the individual could check availability themselves and book the room. You still had to contact the company. And that's really where GDS systems, global distribution systems, came into play. That through global distribution systems, companies could manage their brand, they could do marketing, they could do pricing, they could actually get booking and generate revenue. This was a fantastic leap forward. Hotels loved this because this meant that hotels could actually get more bookings, reach a larger audience, and not necessarily have to hire an exponential number more people to work at their central reservation center. So we saw a huge upswing in the 1990s and early 2000s of GDS systems coming into play. Now we're starting to see a little bit of a decline, and this is going to be a really interesting question and kind of topic for discussion amongst our guest speaker. What we're actually seeing now is that because individual brand and chain lodging sites like Marriott and Courtyard and things like that are becoming so advanced and are really taking advantage of smart technology that customers are now back to booking directly through the company. Some companies are extending things like the best rate guarantee. Holiday Inn or Intercontinental is very, very famous for this. They guarantee that if you book through them, you're going to get the lowest rate possible. And customers are realizing that, and they're starting to book back through the parent company or the parent brand. Connecting a central reservation system through a GDS requires something called a distribution switch. So what a distribution switch is, it's basically an interface, sort of like a firewall. It's what really interfaces the back end and the front end and really allows third parties, whether that's a consumer or whether that's a travel agent, to access a central reservation system. So I can be sitting here in my travel agency, go onto a computer, and I can see real-time, real pricing information, real-time occupancy information, real-time booking information for a particular hotel. And what we need to have a switch. And what happens is the switch takes travel agent software and makes it compatible with central reservation software, because not every central reservation system uses the exact same computer software. There has to be a way for those two systems to talk to one another, and we call that a switch. One of the biggest companies and one of the most popular companies for that is a company called Pegasus. Pegasus is one of the more popular lodging industry switch providers. And again, a distribution switch is a bidirectional interface, so two-directional interface that travel agents and consumers can get direct access to a hotel central reservation systems. And lodging companies want this because it means more bookings for them. When we look at the overall kind of the purpose of a global distribution system, we can look at it from a revenue generation perspective. We can look at it from purely a way to access information. We can look at it as a way to make sure that we're getting the right rates and we're selling hotels for an appropriate amount. There's lots of different reasons that you would want to have access to a GDS if you were a lodging property provider. We see some other examples of kind of some core areas related to GDS systems. I put this link up here. I want you to do a little bit of research, if you could, on the company Amadeus. Amadeus interfaces with airlines, rail, airports, hotels, cruise lines, car rental companies. This truly is a one-stop shop for all hospitality businesses from an e-commerce perspective. 400 plus million travelers a year use Amadeus, 400,000 travel agents around the world. There's a little bit of information on Amadeus and you can take a look at them. In addition, global distribution systems are not the only tool that we use to actually book things. We use what are called OTAs, online travel agents, the Expedia, the Hotels.com of the world. The problem with OTAs is they're very labor intensive, and there's almost a saturation in the market. That the assumption is that you as the lodging provider have to constantly update your information with these OTAs. Global distribution systems, on the other hand, don't necessarily need that. They update automatically because they're getting real-time information from the central reservation system. OTAs don't necessarily have that. There are some challenges with global distribution systems, the safety and the security of data, but the benefits of making sure that you're getting the right room at the right place in the right market is very, very useful, particularly in cases when your rates are changing almost hourly. That the people have a misconception that once we set a rate, it's always going to be that rate for a hotel room. No, I mean, really good revenue managers out there are constantly changing and they're constantly evolving rates based on what they're seeing real time at the property level. In terms of some challenges that we're seeing with global distribution systems today, and this is our final slide, technology is really hindering us. Oops, sorry about that. Let me go here. Technology is really hindering us. We don't have the technology infrastructure to be able to adequately keep up with the pace. Inventory and rate management issues, the more complex the inventory and rate management issues are for a particular lodging property, if that's not conveyed appropriately to global distribution system companies, it presents a challenge. Commissions and transaction fees are eroding profits. To be successful, and we can ask the Amadeus guest speaker that, to be successful, Amadeus takes a commission and a piece of every transaction. Well, from a lodging property perspective, they would rather not have to pay that. And by not have to pay that, people need to book directly through the hotel. So many companies, many lodging providers are telling their customers, book directly with us. The airlines are doing the exact same thing. Yes, you could book through Amadeus. Yes, you could book through some of these third party, these GDSs. But what Southwest wants is that you're going to get the best rate, and we guarantee it if you book directly through us. The mindset behind that is they don't want to have to keep paying commissions. The shift in balance from supplier to customer. Customers today are much more knowledgeable. They're much more savvy. They like technology. They embrace technology. And because they're doing it themselves, they don't necessarily need to rely on a GDS to go out and find that information for them. And things are changing so quickly. We have new types of brands coming online, and when a new concept or a new type of restaurant or a new airline comes up, is a GDS really the best way to convey that from a marketing perspective, or can the company do a much better job themselves? Overall, we'll continue our discussion of GDSs a little bit more in another class, but I wanted to give you just a little bit of an introduction to it today. I hope you've enjoyed this audio lecture. Please take a look at the additional video I've posted, and there'll be an assignment related to the video about Silicon Valley.